In the summer of 1817, London moved with a rhythm both glittering and merciless, a city where fortunes rose beneath chandeliers and reputations crumbled under candlelight. Into this restless season returned Duke Edmund Harrow, a man the ton regarded with a mixture of reverence and morbid fascination. He had once been the ideal of youthful nobility, handsome, dutiful, admired, but grief had refined him into something sharper, quieter, and far more arresting. For nearly a year, he had withdrawn from the relentless machinery of society, mourning the loss of his wife, Amelia, whose beauty had once been the envy of every hostess from Mayfair to Bath. Her carriage had overturned along the rain-slick cliffs near Dover, leaving only a shattered wheel and a length of torn silk. Without a body to bury, Edmund had been left with tormenting doubts and a heart that refused to accept the finality others insisted upon. Yet duty has a way of dragging even reluctant souls back into the public eye. That evening, pressed by Parliament allies who insisted a duke must not languish forever in solitude, Edmund stepped through the grand doors of Lady Rathbone's ballroom. The air pulsed with the scent of roses and polished marble, the music bright and swift, and though conversation hushed briefly at his arrival, he offered only a distant nod before slipping deeper into the crowd. He wore his grief like a perfectly tailored coat, subtle yet unmistakable, and it followed him as surely as the glances of curious matrons who wondered which fortunate girl might eventually replace the legendary Amelia Harrow. Edmund had no intention of indulging their hopes. His presence there served politics alone. Still, he moved with practiced elegance, offering polite greetings, though each smile felt like an effort carved from stone. More than once, he caught fragments of whispered speculation trailing behind him, gentle in tone, vicious in meaning. Some claimed he hid a madness bred by loss. Others murmured that he resisted remarriage out of arrogance. Not one voice acknowledged the simpler truth. He could not bear the notion of loving someone new, while Amelia's memory still clung to him like a fragile perfume. He took refuge beside a marble column, observing the dancers rather than joining them. Young ladies spun in pale silks, their gloved hands fluttering like wings as they moved in patterns dictated by centuries of tradition. Edmund watched them with a detachment that bordered on numbness, until the orchestra struck a brighter, livelier tune, and something in the crowd shifted. A woman stepped into the dance, her movement graceful yet unstudied, as though music rose from her rather than surrounded her. Her gown, modest but elegant, shimmered faintly beneath the chandeliers, and a soft curl escaped the pins in her dark hair, catching the light like a secret daring to reveal itself. Edmund's breath faltered. The world narrowed to a single, impossible figure. At first, he believed exhaustion had conjured her, a cruel trick of longing. But as she turned, laughter touching her lips, he saw Amelia's face, unaltered, unmistakable, devastating. The room seemed to tilt. A cold rush swept through him, displacing every rational thought he had carried into the evening. She moved with the same delicate certainty he had once adored, the same bright intelligence in her eyes, the same tender curve in her smile that had, in distant days, undone him completely. He pressed a hand to the column behind him, steadying himself, though his pulse hammered with disbelief. No woman could resemble Amelia so perfectly. No coincidence could shape itself with such precision. His mind, ravaged by months of wondering, refused to accept illusion. And yet the truth presented itself before him with a clarity sharper than grief. She lived. A murmur rustled through the crowd as Edmund stepped away from the column, his gaze locked on her. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. A pair of debutantes turned to stare openly. Several gentlemen exchanged uneasy glances. A duke is a spectacle in any ballroom, but a duke moving with fierce, unguarded purpose became something far more compelling and dangerous to the brittle structures of decorum. He wove through the dancers, ignoring startled looks and half-formed protests. The woman, his Amelia, or the ghost of her, did not see him at first. She danced with a measured joy that pierced him with equal parts wonder and anguish. When she finally glanced his way, her steps faltered. For a heartbeat, she stilled completely, the color draining from her face. Recognition flared in her eyes, swiftly followed by something more complicated: fear, longing, and a fragile sorrow that cut through him more deeply than her presumed death ever had. The music stumbled, strings wavering before collapsing entirely into silence. The dancers halted in a ripple of confusion. Every spectator turned toward the motionless pair at the center of the floor, the widowed Duke and the woman who bore the features of his lost bride. Edmund stopped only an arm's length away. His voice, when it emerged, was low enough for her alone. "Tell me," he said, struggling to steady the tremor in his breath, "who you are." Her lips parted, but no answer came. Her gaze flicked toward the exit, then back to him, as though weighing escape against confrontation. The tension between them coiled tightly, drawing the entire ballroom into its silent grip. Edmund's world hung suspended on her next word, yet the room around them bristled with rising whispers, disbelief, scandal, speculation gathering like a storm that promised to break upon them both. And as Amelia, or the woman who could not possibly be anyone else, took a hesitant step backward, Edmund felt the fragile threshold between past grief and an uncertain future tilt beneath his feet, urging him toward a truth he had never imagined he might face again. The hush that gripped the ballroom seemed to tighten as Edmund stepped closer, though he moved as one approaching a frightened creature rather than a partner in a quadrille. The woman who had danced so effortlessly only moments before now trembled in the stillness, her gloved fingers twisting together in a gesture he recognized all too painfully. Amelia had done the same when overwhelmed at their wedding, during their first public appearance as husband and wife, even in quiet moments when sincerity threatened to escape the boundaries of etiquette. This nervous habit, delicate yet revealing, struck Edmund with such force that he almost faltered. No impostor could imitate something so intimate, so unperformed. Still, uncertainty gnawed at him, for nothing in the world could explain how his wife, declared dead, mourned, eulogized, stood breathing before him. A matron near the wall gasped loudly, snapping her fan shut with theatrical alarm, and the sound triggered a restless ripple across the assembly. Guests angled toward the pair, some curious, others scandal-thrilled, each hungry to witness the spectacle of a duke losing composure over a mysterious lady. Edmund ignored them all. The woman before him had lifted her chin slightly, though her eyes betrayed her dread. Her voice, when it emerged, was scarcely louder than a breath. "Your Grace, you are mistaken." The words were familiar, but strained, as if she attempted to force distance where recognition had already anchored itself. Edmund studied her intently. The slope of her cheek, the shape of her mouth, the faint freckle near her temple. Every detail aligned with the face he had held in his memories for a year. Yet something new lived within her expression, a guardedness Amelia had never needed with him. That, more than anything, convinced him she hid behind a fragile invention. Before he could speak again, a handkerchief slipped from her grasp. It drifted to the polished floor like a soft exhalation, its embroidery catching the candlelight. Edmund's gaze fell upon the stitched initials. Aged, delicate, unmistakable, and identical to the ones Amelia had sewn into her belongings. A collective gasp rose around them, no longer contained by decorum. Even the musicians stared openly. The woman, Amelia, unless the universe had become a playground for improbable cruelty, turned swiftly, attempting to retreat into the crowd. Edmund reached out but stopped short of touching her, unwilling to startle her further. "Amelia," he whispered, the name escaping him with reverent disbelief. She flinched with all the certainty of someone hearing her true name spoken after an agonizing silence. Panic darted across her features. Then, without a word, she fled toward the balcony doors. Her swift movement fractured the room into murmuring factions. Some ladies clasped hands to their throats as though witnessing a ghost's passing. Men whispered wagers on whether madness or miracle had seized the evening. Edmund did not wait for permission or courtesy. He followed her. The air outside was cooler, carrying the city's distant hum beneath the soft strains of music that had tentatively resumed behind them. Amelia stood near the balustrade, illuminated by lantern light that painted her in warm, trembling hues. She pressed her hands against the stone as though bracing herself against a force stronger than the night breeze. Edmund approached slowly, conscious that any abruptness might cause her to vanish again, this time perhaps forever. "Do not run from me," he said quietly. "Not after this year. Not after everything." She drew a shuddering breath, but did not face him. "You should not have come after me. I could no more remain inside than I could cease breathing," Edmund replied. "Tell me why you are here. Tell me how you survived." Her shoulders tightened as though weighed down by memories too heavy for a single frame. After a long silence, she turned toward him. Her eyes glowed with unshed tears, their familiar depth stirring something raw and urgent in Edmund's chest. "I did not intend for you to see me," she murmured. "I have lived quietly under another name. It was safer that way." "For whom?" Edmund demanded, though he fought to restrain the edge in his voice. "Certainly not for me. I mourned you. I buried you in every way but the physical one." Her expression crumpled, and he regretted the sharpness instantly. Yet she steadied herself, drawing from some inner resolve he had not known she possessed. "I never wished to hurt you, Edmund, but I had no choice. My survival depended upon secrecy, upon letting the world believe I was gone." "Who threatened you?" he asked, stepping closer. "What danger made your vanishing necessary?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the darkness beyond the railing. "I cannot speak of everything tonight. Not here, not with so many ears hungry for scandal." Her voice trembled, though she fought to keep it composed. "But I can tell you this. I lived because someone helped me escape. I stayed hidden because I feared my presence would place you at risk." She swallowed, as though the admission itself cut her. "If the wrong people discovered I had survived, they might have turned their wrath upon you." Edmund's heart pounded with a complex mixture of fury, relief, and aching tenderness. He reached for her hand but stopped short, letting the gesture itself convey his intention without forcing contact. "You cannot expect me to let you disappear again. Not now that I know you live." Amelia's eyes shimmered, reflecting both yearning and alarm. "I will not vanish," she whispered, "but I cannot explain everything tonight. Meet me at dawn in Hyde Park. I will tell you the truth you seek." A fragile promise lingered between them, fragile yet potent enough to tether him to the coming morning. And though the night around them teemed with uncertainty, Edmund felt, for the first time in a year, the faint stirrings of hope. The dawn broke with a gentleness London seldom granted, casting Hyde Park in muted gold as though the day itself wished to soften what must soon be spoken. Edmund arrived early, long before the city's fashionable walkers emerged, driven by a restless urgency that had plagued him throughout the night. Sleep had eluded him entirely. He had paced the length of his chambers, revisiting every memory of Amelia, her laughter echoing along the corridors of Harrow Hall, her fingertips brushing his sleeve when she meant to reassure him, the quiet intelligence in her eyes when she studied the world around her. Each recollection seemed newly sharpened, as though awakened by her improbable return. Yet doubt remained, coiling through him with persistent unease. Why had she lived in secrecy? What peril had been great enough to justify his agony? And why, even now, did she seem burdened by shadows she had not yet dared to reveal? When footsteps finally approached along the dew-laden path, Edmund turned with attention so profound it nearly unsteadied him. Amelia, draped in a modest mourning cloak, her hair unadorned, her expression guarded, paused a few paces away. The quiet around them magnified every detail, the slight tremor in her breath, the hesitation in her stance, the longing she attempted to veil beneath composure. Yet beneath that restraint lived the woman he had loved, the woman he had mourned, the woman who had returned with secrets etched into her very posture. "You came," she said softly, her voice carrying a fragile relief. "I was not certain you would." Edmund stepped closer, though he left a respectful distance between them. "I would have crossed oceans to hear the truth from your own lips. Nothing could have kept me away." Her gaze lowered briefly, as though the sincerity of his words threatened to unravel her resolve. After a steadying breath, she met his eyes again. "Then I must tell you what I have feared for months, that my disappearance was neither accident nor misfortune. It was escape." The statement, though anticipated, struck with undeniable force. Edmund's jaw tightened, but he withheld interruption, granting her the quiet dignity she needed to continue. "The night of the carriage accident," Amelia said, "I had not intended to travel so far alone. I had dismissed my companions, hoping to outrun the dread that had been building for weeks. There were incidents small at first, almost imperceptible. Letters missing, servants bribed, questions asked about my inheritance that bore no innocent purpose." She folded her hands, though her composure wavered. "I believed I could uncover what troubled me without involving you. I thought the danger trivial." Edmund exhaled slowly, understanding blooming with terrible clarity. "You suspected someone sought to harm you." "Not merely harm," she replied. "Exploit. I inherited a portion of my father's estate upon our marriage, but a larger portion was to pass to me should anything unfortunate occur while I remained without children. Certain relatives believed themselves entitled to wealth they could not reach so long as I lived." Her voice grew taut, shadowed by memories too vivid to recount without pain. "My cousins approached matters through whispers first. When those failed, they turned to threats. Subtle, calculated, unmistakable. I could not risk drawing you into their schemes." The words ignited a quiet fury within him, though he fought to temper it. "You should have told me. I would have moved heaven and earth to protect you." "I know," she murmured, sorrow settling across her features. "That is precisely why I said nothing. Your loyalty is fierce, more than they understood, more than I deserved. Had you known, you would have confronted them, and they would have turned their desperation toward you. I could not bear the thought." Edmund looked away, grappling with the bittersweet ache her confession summoned. Her love had been her shield, yet also the blade that cut them both. Gently, he asked, "How did you escape the accident?" "It was no accident," she said quietly. "One of my cousin's hired men forced the carriage from the road. The impact threw me clear, and though I was hurt, I managed to conceal myself in the rocks until a traveler found me at dawn." Her expression softened, touched by reluctant gratitude. "He recognized the danger I faced. He helped me disappear, arranging false papers and a modest lodging. I became someone else, Miss Rowan, and remained hidden while you grieved." Edmund closed his eyes, a storm of emotions surging through him. Anguish for her suffering, rage at those who hunted her, and a profound, overwhelming relief that she still breathed. When he opened them, he found her watching him with trepidation, as though she feared his judgment more than the threats that had chased her into obscurity. "You endured all of this alone," he said, his voice roughened by restrained emotion. "And you believed I would have been safer without the truth." "I believed it then," she whispered. "I am no longer certain." A silence settled between them, heavy yet not hostile. Edmund stepped closer, allowing their nearing presence to bridge the chasm sorrow had carved. "Amelia," he said, softer than the breeze stirring the leaves above them, "I spent every night wishing for you. Not the memory of you, the living, breathing woman who challenged me, steadied me, and made every ordinary moment feel profound. I do not care what danger stood between us. I care only that you stand before me now." Tears glimmered in her eyes, breaking the fragile composure she had maintained since her reappearance. "I never stopped loving you," she confessed. "Even when I believed we must never meet again, my heart remained yours." Edmund reached forward with careful deliberation, brushing a tear from her cheek with the tenderness of a man reclaiming something once believed lost beyond recall. Amelia leaned into the touch, a silent surrender of fear and pretense. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled with both hope and uncertainty. "What happens now?" He took her hands, this time without hesitation. "Now," he said, "I bring you back into the light, and whatever shadows remain, we face them together." Though her breath caught in a mixture of awe and apprehension, she did not pull away. And as the sun continued its slow ascent, illuminating the path before them, their fragile reunion settled into something steadier, an unspoken vow that the truth, however painful, had bound them more tightly than loss ever could. The evening returned with an almost theatrical sense of inevitability, as though London itself anticipated the drama that would soon unfold within Lady Rathbone's ballroom. Hours earlier, Amelia had hesitated when Edmund proposed they confront society together, her expression torn between longing and dread. Yet the resolve that now carried her into the glittering hall was unmistakably hers, a quiet courage sharpened by the ordeals of the past year. Edmund walked beside her, his bearing both protective and unapologetically proud, as though he intended to challenge any soul who dared cast judgment upon her reappearance. Their entrance halted conversation as effectively as a sudden storm. Fans stilled mid-flutter, voices dropped into incredulous murmurs, and the musicians faltered before regaining their tempo, each note strained by curiosity. Amelia felt the scrutiny at once, dozens of eyes tracing her familiar features, comparing the woman before them to the one they had mourned. Some faces shone with shock, others with suspicion, and a few with unabashed fascination. Edmund sensed her unease and offered his arm, a gesture both intimate and publicly defiant. "You need not fear them," he murmured, low enough for her alone. "Tonight the truth stands with us." Though the words steadied her, Amelia could not ignore the tension humming through the room. Her presence contradicted a year's worth of gossip and destroyed every assumption the town had formed about the Duke's grief. More dangerously, her survival suggested Mystery Society would not rest until unraveling. Yet she lifted her chin with quiet dignity, embodying the woman Edmund had always believed her to be, resilient, perceptive, and braver than circumstance had ever allowed her to reveal. Lady Rathbone herself descended from the staircase with theatrical severity, her expression torn between outrage over the disruption and satisfaction at presiding over a scandal of historic magnitude. "Your Grace," she said sharply, addressing Edmund before her eyes flicked to Amelia. "And whoever this may be." Edmund did not hesitate. "This," he declared, his voice resonating through the hall, "is Amelia Harrow, my wife, alive, well, and returned." Gasps erupted in a wave, rippling from one cluster of guests to the next. Several ladies clutched their pearls. A gentleman sank onto a chaise as though the revelation physically overwhelmed him. Amelia trembled despite her poise, and Edmund's hand tightened reassuringly over hers. Lady Rathbone sputtered for a reply, but found herself momentarily defeated by sheer astonishment. Someone in the crowd whispered, "But she died. She must have died." Another countered, "Then who lies buried in Dover?" The speculation swelled, threatening to erode Amelia's fragile composure. Before the murmurs could crescendo into chaos, Edmund stepped forward, drawing Amelia with him to the center of the ballroom. The musicians stopped at once, silenced by an authority no one dared contest. Edmund turned to face the assembly, his posture regal yet stripped of the formality that usually shielded him. For once, he did not speak as a duke forced into diplomacy, but as a man unafraid to expose his heart. "You mourned my wife with me," he said, his voice carrying through the quiet hall. "You offered condolences, prayers, and in many cases, assumptions about my future. But Providence, in its unexpected mercy, has returned her to me, and I will not hide her, nor permit whispers to diminish her courage." Amelia's breath hitched. She had anticipated defense, not reverence. Edmund knelt before her, not theatrically, but in solemn declaration. The act elicited a chorus of gasps. A duke kneeling was an upheaval of social order. Yet Edmund seemed utterly indifferent to the shock he caused. He took her hand gently, as though reacquainting himself with something precious. "Amelia," he said, his eyes steady on hers, I choose you again, freely, publicly, without hesitation. If you will remain at my side, there is no force on earth that could remove you from it." Her composure shattered, not from fear but from emotion so fierce it bent her breath. She had imagined reclaiming her old life only in the quiet corners of memory, never upon the grand stage of society. Slowly, she lowered her free hand to his cheek, a gesture more intimate than any words she might summon. "I never wish to leave your side," she whispered, "and I never will again." The ballroom erupted, not in disdain but in astonished admiration. Even Lady Rathbone dabbed her eyes discreetly, though she would deny it later. The murmurs shifted from scandal to awe, as though witnessing a legend in its earliest form. Edmund rose with Amelia's hand secure in his, radiating a steadiness that silenced any lingering doubts. In the days that followed, the story of Amelia's reappearance swept through London with feverish delight. While some questioned the propriety of her return, many championed the romance with fervor, declaring there's a love resilient enough to defy death itself. The legal inquiry into her disappearance, once reopened, swiftly uncovered evidence against her predatory cousins, who found themselves cornered by the truth Amelia had concealed for so long. With charges mounting and Edmund's influence reinforcing the case, their power crumbled as swiftly as their schemes. When Amelia and Edmund remarried in St. George's, the church brimmed with witnesses eager to claim a glimpse of history. The ceremony unfolded with an exquisite stillness, each vow spoken with a tenderness earned through loss, deception, and rediscovered devotion. Amelia's hands no longer trembled. Edmund's voice no longer strained. They stood united, no longer shadows of grief, but partners restored. In the quiet weeks after, as they retreated to Harrow Hall, Amelia often found herself marveling at how love could fracture, vanish, and yet rise again stronger than before. Edmund, ever attentive, reminded her each day that her return had breathed life back into him. And though the world outside continued to chatter about their tale, within the walls of their home, peace settled at last, woven not from illusion, but from truth, resilience, and the unwavering certainty that neither fate nor fear could sunder them again.